And what's up, everybody? Welcome to the StormCast, the world's best podcast. We're live on YouTube and Twitter. I hope everyone is having a good week so far on this beautiful Monday as we start. Hope everyone is having a good start to their week. Before we get into today's Stormcast, I want to give a quick sound check. And what's up? Yep, we sound amazing. So, alrighty, let's jump right into it. How was your weekend, everybody? My weekend was very good. Very good weekend I had. I saw the back rooms yesterday with my pops. Much anticipated movie for me, and was really looking forward to it. And I wasn't too disappointed. A little bit different than what I expected. Being a long time consumer of backroom and liminal space content, was really looking forward to it. And with those no spoilers, because I did do a movie review on it, which will be dropping sometime this week, so be on the lookout for that. Turn your post notifications on. But no spoilers. It was a little bit different than what a lot of people might expect. It had a lot of liminal space in it, and a lot of the lore from the back rooms was in it too. So if you haven't checked that movie out, it's the opening weekend for it. It was one of the highest grossing horror movie debuts weekends for a horror movie in recent times. So yeah, shout out to the back rooms and the producer uh, Kane Parsons, the young producer for that. So there was no episode last week. I was waiting on my thumbnail guy to make my thumbnail. I can make thumbnails myself, but I don't do too much editing of pictures and videos anymore. I kind of reserve that to my Indian editors, because they're usually on it, but sometimes they're not as on it as fast as I need them to be. So no episode last week. So we do have an episode today, though. All right. So we're here, and I might bring you guys 2 episodes this week, maybe. But yeah, either way, that's why I wasn't here last week. All right. So if you haven't already checked out the latest episode, the last episode of the Stormcast, however, episode 57, we talked all about the San Diego mosque shooting. We talked about the mayor or governor, whichever one she's running for. She's twerking for votes. All right, we talked about that. We talked about the Ebola outbreak going on, the Trump and Xi Jinping meeting that took place. And so yeah, if you haven't checked the episode out, go check it out after you check this one out, right after this episode. Okay. So a lot going on around the world, a lot of breaking news actually that just happened today. And it makes me wonder if I should do news on Mondays, because a lot of news, there's a lot of breaking news on Mondays. I usually do my episodes on Fridays, of course, but there's a lot going on. All right, so let's jump into the latest news before our topics for today. So let's pull those up. Shout out to everybody joining the live as we speak. W's in the chat. All right, so basically the NBA. Let's get into some sports news. All right, so the NBA finals are officially set. Right, we have the New York Knicks are heading to their first finals since 1999 after sweeping the Cleveland Cavaliers, while the San Antonio Spurs knocked off the defending champion Oklahoma City Thunder in a 7-game thriller. All right. So now it's Jalen Brunson and the Knicks versus Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs, with game 1 tipping off June 3rd. And I'm going to go ahead and make my early predictions here, folks, right here live on the pod. I say that this series also goes to Game 7. They drag it out, and Spurs comes out on top, right? I saw a prediction thing. I don't know how accurate it is, but some guy predicted the next 7 NBA Finals winners, and he had the Spurs winning this year, 2026. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my money on the Spurs too. I like Victor Wembanyama. He's a once in a lifetime, once in a generation type athlete. So fun to watch. Obviously he's not American. The foreigners are taking over the NBA, but yeah, I like him a lot because I saw some footage of him training in China with monks as well. So, what's not to like about the guy, right? So, he's like 7'5", pulling up 3-pointers, blocking people, taking it in the paint, dunking. So, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and predict the Spurs take it all in the finals. I did put $50 on the last game between the Spurs and the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I won $50. Right, so yeah, shout out to the homie Tefron who I made the bet with, who ended up paying. A lot of people, you can't trust a man on his word, but you got some friends out there, solid friends that you can, that actually, stick to the word and pay up. So yeah, made $50, and I might have to make a bet. If anybody wants to bet for this NBA finals, let me know. Right? Yeah, I got the Spurs taking it all. So, so today is June 1st. We'll get into some NFL news now. So it's a big day in NFL because teams can save salary cap space by releasing players after today, which often leads to surprise cuts, signings, and roster moves as teams prepare for this upcoming season. As of right now, we're still awaiting the A.J. Brown trade situation between the Eagles and the Patriots, but I will keep you updated on that. That is a big headline going around the league. Where is A.J. Brown going to go? We suspect that it's the Patriots, but, we'll see. And I'll update you when that happens. All right. So I just can't wait until the NBA season. Really, I haven't watched any NBA all year. All I watched is the finals. Well, I don't even watch the finals, really. I just randomly made a bet based off of highlights, and I won that one. I don't watch NBA at all. I don't really have a team. I more so go for, NBA players like that I like. So like Wembanyama, I'll go for the Spurs. Like I like LeBron, but he's obviously aging and soon to retire. So yeah. But as far as NFL goes, guys, I can't wait until the NBA season is over because there is the countdown begins today. It's officially 100 days away from the start of the season, from game 1 of the NFL season. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing my research now so I can go ahead and, get my my fantasy football squads drafted. As you know, I do a lot of fantasy, and I keep up with the NFL watching, and, so that's one of my favorite pastimes is betting, on my fantasy squads. I don't really do much like bets. A lot of people do like prize picks and things like that. I don't do too much of that. I more so put my money into like paid leagues, NFL fantasy leagues, right? So that's my form of betting, which is very unpredictable, right? Very, very unpredictable. Maybe I should get into prize picks, but either way it goes, we have some breaking news in the NFL. The Browns have traded defensive end Myles Garrett to the Rams in exchange for the edge. He's Jared Verse. He's like a linebacker / defensive end kind of guy. So they also get a 2027 first round pick for Myles Garrett. So Jared Verse, I mean, he's not a bad player. He's actually a really great player, actually, Pro Bowler kind of guy. Very explosive, dominant up front, really big and physical um, defensive player. But the Browns, they're just known for taking L's, and this is a horrible trade, honestly, in my opinion. I would never give up Myles Garrett. He's probably the best defensive player in the league, if not the best player all around, right? And so the Browns just doing what the Browns do. Obviously, Jared Verse isn't a bad exchange, as well as, they get that first round pick next year. But I don't even think it's worth it. I would have kept Myles Garrett. Obviously, Myles Garrett probably wanted out of Cleveland. So we'll see how that goes. More news going around the NFL. Here we have the Giants are signing wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. and Juju Smith-Schuster. So two veteran kind of guys. They've been in the league. They're kind of on the downswing. They're not fresh athletes by any circumstance, but they can still provide some talent and some depth to the Giants wide receiver group. Obviously, Odell Beckham, one of my favorite players ever. One of the flashiest guys in recent football. Known for dancing and having an attitude and bringing a lot of life and energy to the game. So I'm excited to see what happens here. How well he is, how healthy he is. Obviously, he dealt with a lot of issues injury wise. So we'll see if the explosiveness is still there, as well as Juju Smith-Schuster, who I believe, I don't know who he was with last season, but you didn't really hear too much. I believe it was either the Chiefs, right? I believe he was with the Chiefs, but either way, the Giants are picking both of those guys up, and they're also signing or releasing Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is retiring, apparently, to become a NBC sports analyst. Okay, so yeah. In other NFL news, did y'all hear that Josh Jacobs was arrested for domestic violence? He reportedly was in a romantic relationship with Oshkosh, the influencer, TikTok star or whatever. So the Green Bay Packers running back Josh Jacobs was arrested Tuesday. This was last week on 5 charges, including battery, strangulation, and suffocation, disorderly conduct, criminal damage to property, and intimidating a victim. According to reports, the incident stems from a disturbance on May 23rd in Wisconsin, after which Jacobs turned himself in. He has been romantically linked to social media personality and model Oshkosh, also known as Oshkosh, okay? With their pair having publicly confirmed their relationship earlier in 2026. Their vacation photos and social media posts, Jacobs' legal team has denied the allegations, stating he is innocent, while the NFL is expected to review the matter under its personal conduct policy. So I see Josh Jacobs beating these allegations. Hopefully he does, so he's back in time for so I can pick him up in for my fantasy squads, right? We need you back on the field. This kind of seems like another situation of believe all women, which you should never do. You should, as a man, you should never, first of all, put your relationship out on the internet, be public with them. Obviously, these NFL stars, aren't red pilled to a lot of stuff. They're used to getting every girl they want, and pretty much having their pick of the litter when it comes to women. But that also comes with a lot of problems, right? And obviously being in the spotlight, having your relationship out there. Women just want the clout. Obviously, women like this are, predators. They're seeking your money, your clout, and everything else, right? They don't really love you. They kind of just like what you provide for them, and that's just how it is. But this is what happens when you get involved with a woman like this. Drama begins to happen. And yeah, so here we have some mugshots of Josh Jacobs. I'm sure he'll beat this. I'm sure he has some of the best lawyers ever, especially being represented by the NFL and the Green Bay Packers. I'm sure he will beat this. But either way it goes, guys, we'll continue on that. But first, go ahead and follow me on Instagram at IcyMick. As you see here, I update you every time I'm going live for the StormCast, right? So this was posted 20 minutes ago before I went live, all right? So at the IcyMick, and we also have a StormCast Instagram at the StormCast, as you see here, all right? So go follow us there. As you see, I keep you updated on everything StormCast related. And that's really, Instagram is one of the best ways you can reach out to me too. If you ever want to be on the podcast, if you ever want me to talk about a certain topic, whatever the case may be. All right. So continuing on with this Josh Jacobs case, new details continue to emerge from the incident at Josh Jacobs' home Saturday night. According to dispatch audio, both a woman and a neighbor called first responders to help before the man involved reportedly left the scene in a Mercedes G-Wagon prior to authorities arriving. All right, so here we have some extended audio from the incident at Josh Jacobs' home on Saturday. All right, let's give it some volume. Fair use.
Has learned more, though, about what went down Saturday morning at Jacobs' home. Dispatch audio lets us listen in as first responders answered a woman's call for help.
I hear yelling and screaming, things being thrown. It's plotting to this location. I have an open line, possibly a male-female.
A few minutes later, dispatch received a second call about that incident from a concerned next-door neighbor.
Neighbor is calling now saying that her neighbor was assaulted.
Dispatches are later heard saying the man suspected in that assault was not there. He drove away from the home in a Mercedes G-Wagon, but that easily spotted SUV was being tracked with license plate reader cameras.
Yeah, at this point, we'll want that vehicle stopped if they come across it.
In the end, deputies and an ambulance responded to the call at Jacobs' home. TMJ4 has learned more, though, about what went down.
And so that's what happens, when you get yourself involved in these women. You're a high-status man, and, you get all this money, and you think you're on top of the world, right? Famous athlete, on a huge contract, and all of a sudden you get into a relationship with one of these risque women, these predators. And, stuff like this can happen. Your whole reputation can be ruined. You can possibly, if he does end up, being found guilty of any crimes, charges related to this, he can definitely get kicked off of the team and not be able to, pretty much get blacklisted from the NFL, not be able to get onto another team, kind of like how we saw Kaepernick. Obviously a different situation, but you can get blackballed in the NFL and in sports in general, because we know who run sports, NFL and the NBA and, these major corporations, right? That doesn't have to be stated. So yeah, it's controlled. It's all about money. And if you're messing up the money, if you're a locker room, cancer to that franchise, creating drama around the players, around the franchise, messing with the money, they'll go ahead and kick you off. So we have more news related to this, though. Josh Jacobs was released from custody after he was arrested. The Browns County DA not ready to formally charge the Packers running back. So good news. And this coming from the NFL. So here is Matt LaFleur responding to Josh Jacobs' arrest. Let's give it some volume and make it full screen. Let's get into it. Fair use.
Meanwhile, in Green Bay, Josh Jacobs released from jail Wednesday after his arrest on domestic violence charges. The statement from the Brown County.
All right, I'm trying to get this off the screen. Hold up, folks.
District Attorney's office says that after reviewing the available evidence, they're not yet prepared to make a formal charging decision. Quote.
Now it's a picture-in-picture. Hold on. We'll just play from here. How about that?
Our office has requested additional investigation as there is reason to believe that additional evidence may exist that would impact whether criminal charges are appropriate and what charges would be issued. In the meantime, they released Jacobs from custody. So that is an interesting little wrinkle for those that thought that this was going to be a straight line in the process. So we'll keep you informed on what happens there. Here's Matt LaFleur in the meantime.
Well, I know there's going to be a lot of questions about Josh. I'm going to stick with the statement that we put out as an organization and just let the process play out.
That as far as football goes, you have to prepare for the possibility that you might be playing some of the season without him, especially this time of year.
Well, I think a lot's going to happen between now and then.
Have you all had any communication with him the last 3 days? Or?
Yeah, respectfully, I'm not going to elaborate on anything.
All right, there you have it. Packers head coach Matt LaFleur doing some PR for the Green Bay organization, obviously sticking to the script, not giving out too much details, but I do believe Josh Jacobs will beat this case, as most athletes do when it comes to these domestic violence charges, unless it was, that serious and there's damning evidence against him. I think he should be okay to enter. Obviously I don't know all the details, but from what I've read and what I've seen regarding it, it just seems like a clout chase, a money grab, some tension went on. Hopefully it's not too serious. All right. But I will keep you updated when we get more information regarding that. All right. Regarding that situation. All right. Anyways, in other news, we have a man uses a excavator to destroy a home after wife ends marriage, folks. I say it over and over. If you're in a relationship with a woman and she's driving you, to react emotionally like this, best case is to just leave, right? Get your stuff and leave the situation before it turns, worse than it should be, right? Because we see a lot of times men, let the best of their emotions get to them, and that's dangerous, right? When you're controlled by emotions as a man and you don't remain stoic, things like this can happen, right? Violence can ensue and destruction, as we're seeing here. All right, so a Pennsylvania man tears down a home with the excavator after his wife says the marriage is over. All right, so authorities say 48-year-old Eric Pirweza, used a Kubota excavator to demolish part of his family's home after a heated domestic dispute, causing extensive damage and raising concerns about the structure's stability. All right. So according to a criminal complaint, Pirza allegedly returned home after drinking throughout the night and began arguing with his wife. When she told him their marriage was over, investigators say he responded with a disturbing warning. "If it's over, I'll tear this house down." Police allege that moments later, Pirza climbed into the excavator and began ripping apart the rear of the home while his wife and 2 daughters were still inside. The complaint states that during the wife's 911 call, dispatchers could hear screaming and the sound of the excavator tearing into the house in the background, right? So obviously this guy had some either contractor background or some building or some architectural background to have an excavator in his backyard to be able to do this in the first place, right? This house looks extremely big, right? Like it's, planned out like there's a blueprint to this house. It's not one of those cookie cutter houses. It's one of those, mapped out, drawn out houses, right? And that took construction and time, architecture and builders time to make, right? So let's see, folks, hopefully, gladly it didn't get worse, because and a lot of times you see situations like this, domestic disputes, they don't end well, right? Obviously, this is minor compared to what could have happened, which is, he grabs a gun and he decides to end everybody's life, right, including himself. You see that a lot of times, right? You can say it's a W for the wife for not, for still having her life as well as the kids, right? But here we have the CBS News report, fair use. Let's get into it.
The massive damage left behind after police say an argument between a husband and wife spiraled out of control Tuesday morning. Investigators say 48-year-old Eric Pirza used a Kubota excavator to rip apart the rear of the family's home.
I'd like to know what she said to him, because I'll make sure I was safe.
According to the criminal complaint, Pirza's wife told police her husband arrived at the family's home after drinking all night and began arguing with her. When she told him the marriage was over, investigators say he responded with a chilling threat. If it's over, I'll tear the house down.
42 years I've been married. We yell at each other all the time, but I've never threatened to tear the house down.
Police say moments later, Pirza climbed into the excavator and began tearing into the house, while his wife and 2 daughters were still inside. Drone video shows the massive damage left behind after police say an argument between a husband and...
All right, so there you have it. You hear that guy right there, that blue pill type of guy, marriage, talking about his marriage. I argue, my wife yells at me all the time, and we never, it never take it that far. It's a good point, but everybody's marriage is different, right? Not everybody's in it for the same reasons, and I would assume after you have kids, you kind of, you get tired of each other, being together for that long. That's why marriage is dead in the first place, right? In the modern world, there's really no benefit for a man, I always say, to get married in the first place, other than, to raise a family and have kids, if you do end up getting divorced and then she ends up taking half of your stuff and then you're salty, and you want to kill her, it's just, women are too incentivized to get divorced nowadays, anyway, and they get favor in the court. But there's more on this, folks. Let's see what else we have for this.
The criminal complaint says dispatchers could hear yelling and the sound of the excavator during the 911 call. Investigators say after the destruction stopped, Pirza went back inside, grabbed a gym bag, and took off toward Fawn Township before eventually being taken into custody.
You don't think it's going to happen around here.
Neighbors we spoke with off camera say they're still struggling to understand what happened. One man who says he knows Pirza personally and has hunted with him before described him as a big outdoorsman and said he was shocked by the allegations. Pirza is now facing charges including causing a catastrophe, reckless endangerment, and disorderly conduct. Court records also show his wife planned to seek a protection of abuse order following this incident. The criminal complaint says dispatchers could hear yelling and the sound of the
All right, so there you have it, folks. There's that. Bottom line, never let your emotions drag you to this point, right? Because you're going to look like, as a man, you're going to look like the bad guy in this situation 99 times out of 100, right? You're not going to win in this situation. And you reacted emotionally, you let the emotions get the best of them. And, you don't want a divorce. You're worried about this. Go get another woman, right? You got kids, right? You've done your job. Obviously, you've raised them to a certain point, right? Let it go, right? But it happens like that sometimes, right? You let the your emotions get the best of you. You react, and I'm sure now he's sitting in jail, thinking like, "Damn, it wasn't even that serious. I could have just, took a woo-saw, grabbed my gun. I could have went hunting with the neighbor, and found another woman at the end of the day, right? As a man, you can always move on. Go have more kids, right? You can go have more kids. She can't have more kids, right? Right, her prime is over. But as a man, you can have kids forever, and you could have, you could have won in more ways than one in this situation. But you end up taking a huge L. So, we'll keep you updated on that. Not a good situation for that guy. All right, moving on. So the white couple that adopted those 5 black children as slaves, remember that case? So yeah, they were sentenced to 375 years in prison collectively combined. So yeah, if you don't remember the white couple we discussed, the case where the white couple, I believe they were in West Virginia. They adopted black children. They were charged and were found guilty of more than 30 charges, including, forcing them to work heavy labor, spending much of their time in 20 by 14 shed with no lights, running water or bedding, using buckets as toilets. So yeah, this is one of those, controversial cases. Obviously, the adoptees being white and the kids being black. I don't even know why white people want to adopt black kids and vice versa. Like, obviously, if you feel like you're doing the right thing, but a lot of times it's kind of suspect, right? It's like, just I don't know. I always feel fishy when I see like, white people adopt black kids or black people adopt white kids. It doesn't really make sense. Like, why? And this is same goes for when I see gay couples adopt kids. I think being gay is perversion. And so when I see, gay dudes adopt kids or gay women adopt kids, I always feel like they're going to be, perverted, and, I think it's wrong. All right. So I don't like to see that either. It's one of those things. So here we have some pictures of some evidence of what it looked like. Yeah, let's give it some volume.
Follow up. There was a contact made with a worker once, but there was no further contact to coordinate going and making a visit to a residence together.
The jury saw days of video the Arlo camera saved, including the moments deputies busted in the door on the shed on October. Lance and Whitefeather kept motion-activated Arlo cameras on the.
So apparently these two that adopted these kids and kept them as slaves, they had cameras in the house which were confiscated and used as evidence. And you can show them having to, use, the bathroom in buckets, and then they would have to cover up themselves with sheets and stuff like that because they knew they were being filmed. And I don't know how they thought they were going to get away with this in the age of, cameras and social media. And once these kids
from 2019 to 2023, the two were busted in the door. Lance and Whitefeather.
I forget how they were found. I guess I think one of the kids actually got away and then told the authorities about what was happening. And so that's how they were caught, doing this. But, yeah, I don't know how they thought they were going to get away with this. And I'm pretty sure stuff like this is happening more than we know. But, in the age of, smartphones, folks, it's hard to get away with crimes. There's cameras everywhere. You're being watched and listened to. And so let's continue with this, see what else is
on the shed on October 2nd. The children were turned over to Child Protective Services, and when Lance and Whitefeather got back with 2 of the children that night, they were later arrested. But that was just the beginning of their charges and the investigation. On Friday, the jury got an inside look at Whitefeather's cell phone. This included text messages between she and Lance where they referred to the kids as monkeys and pigs. Often Lance would describe physical punishment where he said he, quote, knocked one.
Damn. So calling them monkeys and pigs. So they were chimping out for sure, right? Shut the builder. I don't know what's gonna happen with him. So it looks like he's gonna be away for a long time too. Racism is still obviously well and alive and prevalent. I'm not. Racism has no effect on me personally because I feel like it empowers me, right? It doesn't really do much to me. I grew up, with white people, with black people, with all type of different races of people, and I'm well cultured, and so it's why racism really has no effect on me because I've seen both sides of the table. So, but it's ignorance. It's just ignorance, and you can't let it hold you back or offend you or oppress you anymore. In the big 2026, we should, it is what it is. White people live with black people. Black people live with white people. We share, this. We love this same music now. Culture. Our cultures are intertwined. So we'll continue on though.
One of them. We saw one text where Lance said, quote, somebody didn't say thank you, and his sandwiches disappeared. We also saw more video from Whitefeather's phone from their time in Washington that also showed yelling and physical abuse from Lance. A finance expert from the West Virginia Fusion Center, Alyssa Ledbetter, also took the stand on Friday. She broke down the adoption payments Whitefeather and Lance received from Minnesota. She said in total what they analyzed from busted in the door on from 2019 to 2023, the two received about $318,000 in adoption support payments, but she testified this didn't tell the whole story.
Well, the assistance began in June of 2018, and I only had from June of 2019 to November of 2023, so altogether we're missing about 18 months.
All of this leading up to the most harrowing testimony so far on Friday afternoon from someone who lived it. We are not allowed to film or record the victims who will testify in this case, but we're in the room as the teen girl, now 18, but 16 at the time, shared what her life was like both in Washington State and in Sissonville. She said life progressively got worse with Whitefeather and Lance once they moved to the ranch in Washington in 2019. This is when the outdoor labor began, she said, and the physical punishments that included hits from a PVC pipe while under from 2019 pipe while under a child services investigation there in Washington. Eventually they moved to Sissonville, but she did not know why. She talked about how CBS was called soon after they arrived in West Virginia, and she detailed a visit from a worker who stayed on the porch and talked to them through the screen door. The teen testified she was not honest with CPS because Lance could hear her from where she was standing. Eventually, she and her teen brother, who has several mental health disorders, were locked in a shed in August of 2023. She said she went without a shower for 2 months and never changed clothes. She went from sleeping on a mattress to the floor with a sleeping bag. Her brother slept on the concrete floor with only cardboard at his head. She said she was forced to be his babysitter, but testified he was never the dangerous, violent kid that Lance and Whitefeather made him out to be. Pipe while under a child. She recalled the use of physical violence, pepper spray, and racial slurs from Lance and Whitefeather. She recalled also being scared when police arrived at the shed, worried that she would say something to upset Whitefeather. Some of her more emotional moments came during cross-examination by Whitefeather's attorney, Mark Plants. At one point, he referred to Whitefeather as her mother, and she quickly corrected him. He questioned why some of her interviews before this contradicted what she said on the stand, but when Tuck asked her why she felt comfortable telling the truth now, she said, because I know I won't have to go back to that. She recalled the use of physical violence.
All right, we got justice for this. Obviously, these two are going to be locked away for a very, very long time. Very, sickening case. I want you guys to let me know your thoughts on this. Is this punishment enough? You know, should they receive perhaps the death penalty? I don't think they should get the death penalty for this. Although this is very sickening, they should definitely, live the rest of their days under a prison for sure, though. So this person says, "I'm sorry, but I honestly feel like white people shouldn't be able to adopt black children because of this type of behavior." This person says 375 years. Why not the death penalty? All right, so a lot of the same sentiment I was relaying there. Perhaps this punishment not enough. Some people thinking it's not enough. Some people agreeing with me that white people shouldn't adopt black kids, and I think the same thing for black people adopting white kids. I don't, it's just weird to me. I don't know how to explain it. It just doesn't seem right. But all right, guys, that is all of our news for today's episode. We're going to get into our topics for today. Our first topic up is we've got school teachers gone crazy. So school teachers have gone crazy, folks. We are in the rise of the modern day PDF file for teachers. Right? Teachers are the newest predators, right? Sending your kid to school at one point may have seemed safe. You would think the teachers would protect them. But now the teachers are the same ones preying on your kids. This week alone, 8 teachers were busted with raping students. This is so widespread, and it has been happening for years. Only just now are women starting to get charged, and even still, barely. Some of these rapists are getting 40 days, and that's it. Where are the feminists now? And that's a big thing too. When these teachers seem to get, convicted of this crime, they're getting the slap on the wrist, right? Whereas if it was a man, found guilty of, raping and, sexually abusing, assaulting, whatever, their students, it would be seen as much more of a serious case, right? They would get buried under the prison. And so, yeah, when I was in high school, you would get in trouble. You would fear getting in trouble with teachers. And I guess now they're just comfortable with their teachers, right? They're just having all type of relationships and sex and hanging out with their teachers. I don't know what's going on these days. We'll read more all up on it. So this teacher was charged with, also, when I was in high school, I do remember one of my classmates, whose name shall not be named because I don't want to out him or anything, but I remember I remember him telling me he had sex with one of the teachers there, and I don't know how true it was. A lot of people were saying that that they heard about the same thing, but obviously it's been happening for a while. Just a lot of this is just now coming into the light. All right, so this teacher right here was charged with having sex with a student in his school closet and is now accused of abusing 5 others, including a girl, right? This one right here is a prep school teacher, 27. She filmed having sex with a student she was tutoring. This one is an elementary school teacher who cheated on her husband with a 16-year-old. This is a South Carolina elementary teacher was arrested after missing kids were found at her house, right? This teacher apparently raped a 17-year-old student in a 4-hour marathon, right? And they say rape in all of these because the kid is underage, right? But whether it was consensual or not, it's considered rape because the kid is underage, right? But a lot of times, the boys probably were just fine with it, probably, carrying on the relationship and, playing their part in the relationship as well, right? So that's probably why a lot of these women get a slap on the wrist, because it was technically consensual, but under law, defined as a, child abuse and sexual assault. So this is the teacher that filmed herself having sex with a student. She was tutoring him as a sex slave, apparently. Okay. These two teachers were having sex with the same boy at a Georgia school. I'm just going to say sex instead of, or grapes, because I'm sure, it wasn't grape, right? These women would not be physically able to grape a 17-year-old boy or a high school boy at that age. Usually the boys are already stronger than their teachers, and it would be hard for them to just grape the boy without them going along with it, right? And so this teacher gets 15 months after admitting she had sex with a 16-year-old student and gave him marijuana. All right, so we'll read more on this. This comment says, "Not all women, but always a woman." This comment says, quote, "Not all men, but always a man, huh? Go ahead, feminists, explain this shit." All right, yeah, the feminists have been quiet lately. So this one says, "Is this an uptick in women offenders or just more of them being caught?" And I just think it's more of them being caught. It's probably been happening for a while now, especially with the adaptation and, of, smartphones and, students and teachers being able to, communicate outside of school much easier, through Snapchat, through social media, Instagram, but you see it a lot through, Snapchat, them sending pictures and, Instagram and things like that. So, continuing on this topic, here are the two high school teachers in Aurora. I don't know what state that is. Aurora accused of sexual conduct with the same student. All right, some would call this student legendary. And I'm sure that, this kid goes back to, these kids are going back to school and telling their friends, like, "Hey, I'm banging Miss So-and-so, Miss Greenwood, and I'm also banging Miss Johnson," right? And, because I'm that guy, a lot of his friends will probably be like, "Hey, man, that's fire, bro. Like, how did you pull that off?" All right, but it doesn't look too good for the teachers in this case, right? So,
Peoria.
All right, so let's give it some. Let's make the screen bigger, shall we? All right, we can't. All right, we'll watch it from here. The screen is big enough. And this is from Arizona, family. Okay, so this is Aurora, Arizona, folks. All right, so fair use.
Police submitted charges against both teachers to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, but prosecutors sent the cases back to law enforcement, asking for additional investigation.
And I'm not sure I've ever had a case in my 30 years of two females perpetrating against the same male victim.
Two teachers accused of abusing one student victim.
And it's feeling a need for attention, power, control, revenge, and then it can seem excessive or almost obsessive.
Child abuse prevention specialist Jessica Nicely and forensic psychologist Dr. Brecken Blades agree this case is highly unusual. Both Angela Berlacca and Haley Beck taught at Centennial High School in Peoria. Berlacca worked there for 25 years, and Beck got the job in 2020. The two educators were put on administrative leave in August 2025 after allegations of sexual conduct with a student came to light.
These women are the 4%, because 96% of the time child sexual abusers are men.
Berlacca voluntarily surrendered her Arizona teaching certificates, but Beck did not.
Y'all heard that? She says 96% of the time that the perpetrators of these sexual assaults are men. I don't see evidence to that. Where is the evidence of that? Because all I've been seeing is female teachers as of lately. There might be here and there a male teacher, that gets caught for this, but most times it's a man, right? And that's all the only cases that have been popping up on my feed have been women. But anyways, we'll skip past that and continue.
Not And last week, the Peoria Unified School District Governing Board unanimously voted to fire her.
We send our kids to your schools 10 months a year, 5 days a week, 7 hours a day. So as a parent, I'm glad to see that these pedophiles like Haley Beck are being held accountable as much as possible.
In the district's statement of charges document against Beck, it states she began grooming one of her students before he turned 18 in December 2024. Detectives believe the sexual harassment went on during his sophomore and junior years when she was his psychology and sociology teacher. Investigators claim Beck gave him special treatment in class, did his homework, and erroneously improved his grades and attendance record. Police say she gave him access to her car, bought him gifts, food, alcohol, and drugs, and even paid him more than $600, calling herself his sugar mama and writing it felt like straight prostitution. The investigation found in about 6 weeks, they exchanged more than 4,000 texts about sexual and illegal activity.
They do a lot of sort of distorted thinking and manipulation of the facts, even as they're presenting them to themselves to make their behavior seem acceptable or okay.
I feel like when the perpetrator is a woman and the victim's a boy, people make jokes. It's not funny. It's not an achievement. He's a victim. That is not a relationship they were having. That is rape.
I tried to get in touch with both teachers, but did not hear back. Haley Beck can dispute her termination at a hearing with the district. She has 1 week from today to request that, and she hasn't done so yet. In the newsroom, Michaela Marshall for Arizona's Family.
All right, so there's one case, folks. School teachers gone wild. We need to make a show called School Teachers Gone Wild. If you ever see that, just know that I pitched it first and I want all credit. All right. We have another case here. This coming from KSAT. NISD teacher was arrested. Hold on, let's go back, folks. So this one actually is a male, right? This is one of the rare male teachers that are one of the high school teachers in this School Teachers Gone Wild segment. Okay, so a NISD teacher was arrested accused of improper relationship with student. Affidavit says Chad Allen Rodriguez, a physics and astronomy teacher at John Jay High School, has been placed on administrative leave. NISD says. All right, so hopefully hopeful families say teen declared brain dead after falling. Okay, no. All right, so let's get into this. That was something else. All right, so let's put some volume to it. Let's see. Is there volume? I don't hear anything, grandmother. Okay, so this is something unrelated that has nothing to do with it. All right. So, what are you having improper? So yeah, this is in San Antonio, a Northside Independent. Yeah, I thought there was a video actually. Before I read on this, let me make sure that there's no video I'm missing. Oh yeah, so we did have one. Here we go. All right, and this coming from KSAT. All right. Fair use. And there is no volume again. Gotta love it, folks. We do it live, all right? So bear with me here as we get this figured out.
Nice. Oh, wow.
And now the ad. Awesome. All right, let's get that.
A Northside ISD teacher was arrested this weekend for allegedly having an improper relationship with a 17-year-old girl. This is Chad Allen Rodriguez. A district spokesperson said he's been placed on administrative leave. According to an arrest affidavit, another student reported seeing Rodriguez and the teen alone in a classroom. That teen was later interviewed, and she told investigators the pair's relationship had been going throughout the school year. Rodriguez was arrested off campus, according to NISD.
All right, there you go.
Square makes running my business easy. Flowercraft has been around since 1974, and it's a strong part of this community. We had a legacy POS.
Let's stop that. It's not always a woman, but in most cases for these teacher, student relationships, a lot of time we have been seeing it has been. But this case is a male. All right, so a Northside Independent School District teacher was arrested for allegedly having an improper relationship with a 17-year-old girl, according to an arrest affidavit. Chad Allen Rodriguez was booked into the Bexar County Adult Detention Center on Saturday on an improper relationship between an educator and a student charge. Bexar County jail records show on Sunday, an NISD spokesperson confirmed to KSAT that Rodriguez is a physics and astronomy teacher and a football and track coach at John Jay High School. The district said Rodriguez, who was hired by NISD in August 2016, has been placed on immediate administrative leave. On May 15th, authorities responded to the campus in the 7600 block of Marbach Road for a case involving a teacher and a student, the affidavit states. An unknown student was walking the hallway on May 14th near Rodriguez's classroom when they allegedly saw the teen and Rodriguez alone in the classroom. Wonder what they were doing in that classroom alone, right? Very fishy and odd. So the teens that they had an ongoing relationship throughout that year. During her interview, the affidavit states the relationship began with eye contact and flirting in the classroom before it escalated to kissing and sexual intercourse, which allegedly occurred multiple times throughout the school year. The teen also told authorities that Rodriguez exchanged cell phone numbers with her and both would send explicit photos to each other. Surveillance footage obtained by investigators allegedly showed the teen going into Rodriguez's classroom alone and remaining inside for about 10 minutes. All right, a little quickie. In the classroom, and the fact that they're doing it in the school is pretty wild stuff, right? With cameras everywhere, kids everywhere, kids that are, looking for some drama, teachers that are looking for some drama. You're just getting, very risky behavior on this teacher, on this guy, on this man, right? Not smart. So the affidavit states another student is seen in the surveillance footage looking through the window, and the teen exits the classroom shortly after. Okay, so he probably got caught, and then they got caught, and then he wanted to walk out. So NISD said Rodriguez was arrested off campus, and NISD also said the district and the campus are fully cooperating with law enforcement. The investigation remains ongoing. All right, so we will keep you updated if we get more details on that case. But let's go back here. I have to add that back to we have more on this, right? More cases. So who is Angela Palmerez, the 27-year-old Texas substitute teacher who was arrested in Llano ISD case over alleged improper relationship with student? All right, so yeah, I've got a Ling here. It looks like an Asian woman, perhaps Filipino or Korean, perhaps mixed with white, I would assume. So a Texas substitute teacher has suddenly become the center of a fast-growing online storm after her arrest in a case involving alleged contact with a student. It's crazy that these adults want to, get with the high school students so bad. Obviously, they're sick enough to, and not mature enough or whatever the case may be, but they can't get, I'm sure they could get an actual normal relationship that is deemed appropriate, which would only be 18 plus. So you only got to wait another year, but they can't wait, and they're getting caught. out here, one after another. So the story picked up pace when her booking photo and details began circulating widely on social media, pulling in millions of views and reactions. What started as a local legal case quickly turned into a viral discussion filled with memes, criticism, and serious concerns. As the tension keeps rising, many people are now trying to understand the person behind the headlines and what exactly led to this situation. All right, so who is Pamela Palmeiras, a 27-year-old substitute from Texas who was working with the Llano Independent School District? She was most recently linked to Llano High School, where she served in a temporary teaching role, substitute. So here she is, not bad looking. All right, a lot of times these teachers will be, not very attractive, I would say. But and then you have sometimes where you got some, pretty hot looking teachers that these kids are hooking up with. All right. So officials confirmed that she had not worked in the district since early April 2026. Concerns were raised after reports claimed she had been communicating with students outside school hours in a way that crossed professional boundaries. So she got caught. She got snitched on by one of the kids, more than likely. The kid finds the phone. Like, who are you talking to? Oh, I'm talking to my 27-year-old teacher. Then the kid's parents report her to authorities, and she gets caught. So never smart, folks. Never smart in the age of smartphones. To me, evidence is everywhere, right? So following these reports, the school district removed her from its her substitute role list and alerted law enforcement, which led to a formal investigation. All right, so Palmeiras was arrested in April 2026 in Temple, Texas, located in Bell County. She faces a second-degree felony charge under Texas law for improper relationship between educator and student. All right, investigators interviewed witnesses, collected digital evidence, and obtained an arrest warrant before locating her. She was taken into custody without incident with support from state authorities. All right, she was later booked in a Bell County jail, and her bond was set to $150,000. Officials have not shared detailed information about the alleged communications or how many students may be involved. The investigation is still ongoing, folks. So I will update you when we get more on that case if more is released. All right. So continuing with this, with school teachers gone wild. If y'all like this segment, y'all let me know. We're exposing the female PDFs out there, right? And the teachers out there, the freaky, naughty teachers out there. Teaching your kids. So here we have from Fox News, prep school teacher filmed sex with student she was tutoring. And she says, not my best thinking. All right. So here we have Fox News, fair use. Right. So let's see what we have here. Right.
You've already built your own way of caring for patients. The last thing you need is another
That's full screen. Okay, this is okay, so this is the second time that we've got a video that is unrelated to our topic. All right, so let's skip that. So we'll go ahead and read what went on here. A Michigan teacher was sentenced Tuesday after pleading guilty to having sex with a 16-year-old student she was tutoring and recording the encounters, according to court records. Fox 2 Detroit reported that 27-year-old Jocelyn Sanderman was sentenced to 4 to 15 years in prison in Oakland County Circuit Court after pleading guilty to third-degree criminal sexual conduct. Sanderman was arrested and arraigned in June 2025 on the charge stemming from a sexual relationship in 2023. At the time, Sanderman was a teacher at Oakside Prep Academy, a charter school in Waterford Township, about 30 minutes outside downtown Detroit, when she had sex with the student she was tutoring. I wish they would just, I know the kids are minors, but I wish they would show some of the students just so we can kind of get an understanding of the full scale situation. I'm sure most of these kids were like, the popular jock, good looking, athlete type kids at school. I'm sure these weren't the quiet, reserved kids at school. I'm sure these are the popular athletes. I'm assuming. So the judge. So here we have the teacher here. Another, I would say, good looking. Above average. Right above average. I give her about a 5.5, 6. Looking woman. So definitely for a teenager, this is a 10, right? You're at that age, you're the horniest you've ever been, right? You've always wanted to have sex with your teachers, right? And then you get the opportunity to. You're not going to turn that opportunity down if you get the opportunity. And and that's why we're seeing more and more of these cases pop up around the world, including, obviously with the, the prevalence of smartphones now, people are getting exposed. So the judge presiding over this case said Sanderman recorded the sexual encounters with the teen at his home. So they were making some flicks too, even recording the sex, right? Making some OnlyFans content. So Sanderman told another teacher about the relationship, and the teacher contacted police, prompting an investigation. Oh, so she snitched on herself. Interesting. I was not expecting that. So Sanderman, her attorney said, Sanderman's attorney said his client was unaddressed, has unaddressed mental health issues. Okay, so, quote, she made a tremendous error of judgment here. A lot of it has to do with her own mental health issues, right? Blame the mental health, right? She's going to have to undertake on her own. She understands that, and she's working forward and trying to do her best to become a better person. Right. So she didn't have mental health issues when she was, planning to hook up with them, going and, and then going over to his house and filming it and having sex and, doing this multiple times with probably multiple students, right? She didn't have mental health issues when that was occurring, but all of a sudden when she's caught, here come the mental health issues, right? Typical out, so yeah, we'll keep you more updated more on that case as well. And we have more teachers gone wild. Here we have ex-Alabama girls high school basketball coach charged with deviant sex with student dumped by husband. It's crazy. A lot of times these teachers are married, right? They have, husbands. A lot of times they have kids of their own, which is crazy because, what they want their kids to be, going around and having sex with their teachers. That's crazy. So a former Alabama girls high school basketball coach who was once pegged as a great role model for young people was charged with deviant sexual intercourse with a student, among other crimes. Paige Adams, 35, was arrested Tuesday after a grand jury indicted her on more than 30 alleged sex crimes. The indictment came less than a month after she resigned from Cold Springs High School after school officials received a complaint. The charges include distributing obscene material to a student, one count of a school employee having sexual contact with a student under the age of 19, and one count of a school employee engaging in a sex act or deviant sexual intercourse with a student, CBS 42 reported. So let's see if we can get some more on this case. So here we have the teacher, the ex basketball coach. high school basketball coach. She's about 5'9", and I wouldn't say this is this is about typical average white woman here. As a student though, she's incredibly hot to you, right? She older, sexy teacher type vibes, kind of a fantasy. But these women are predators, right? You can't look at it in that way. You have to be objective under the law and realize that they, are taking advantage of these kids in one way or another. So this 32-count grand jury indictment speaks for itself, Coleman County District Attorney Champ Crocker told the news outlet. It was not immediately clear how old the student was at the time of Adams' alleged misconduct. Let's scroll down here. So Adams led the school's girls basketball team for one season. Her husband, Drew, poor guy, who filed for divorce after her resignation, coaches the boys' team. Oh, so he's the boys' basketball coach. Oh, okay. During her lone season as coach, Adams led the team to a 23-11 record. Okay. Winning the area championship and appearing in the AHSAA Final Four. All right. So, at least she's a good coach, I would say. She was once lauded by Coleman County Schools Superintendent Shane Barnett as a great role model for the young people of Coleman County. All right. So not so much seen as a great role model anymore. So yeah, this is the first formal complaint I have received regarding this employee, Barnett said in a statement posted to social media. As soon as the concern was brought forward, an investigation was immediately initiated. The employee chose to resign. All right, so Adams and her husband had been married for 15 years before all of this came out. So Adams was released from jail after posting a $225,000 bond, but is required to wear an electric monitoring device, local media reported. All right, so that's what we'll read for this case specifically. Here is a picture of the high school. All right, and folks, here she is. So this is the Paige Adams case we were just reading on. She was recently she wants the sexual charges with the student dropped, arguing he was 18-year-old from a different school. Okay, so married high school coach, well, now divorced coach Paige Adams, 35 years of age, is arguing to have all 32 sexual-related charges dismissed, claiming the alleged victim was an 18-year-old student who never attended Cold Springs High School in Coleman County, Alabama, where she worked as both a teacher and a girls' basketball coach. She was charged under Alabama's specific school employee statutes because the student was 18 below the laws that the law 19-year-old cutoff for these offenses. So even though the state's general age of consent is 16, Adams allegedly had a sexual relationship with the student and exchanged explicit material at least 30 times between February and March 2026, right after leading her team to a state championship in her only season as head coach. She resigned from teaching and coaching positions in late March and was arrested in April. Her attorney argued that Alabama's school employees' offense laws do not apply because she never held any educational or extracurricular authority over a student from another school in the same district. A judge will hear her motion to dismiss the charges August 12th, 2026. Adams has pleaded not guilty and remains free on bond. Her husband, Drew Adams, filed for divorce shortly after the allegations surfaced. All right, and let me see how much that bond was again, because these teachers, I mean, they're not making but so much money. right? So if they're posting bond, she has to be broke, by now, right? That had to have done a number on her bank accounts. Yeah, the bond was $225,000. Obviously, I don't think you post. You have to pay that full amount. But folks, that what you pay 20% of that? Let's see. Let me do the math here. 20% of 225,000 would be, so she had to pay up 45,000. Okay, that's not too bad, but she's gonna have to pay up the rest of that, right? So, not good. That's a lot. That's probably her whole year's worth of salary right there, down the gutter. All right, so here we have some more on this case. Here we go.
Show that a former coach accused of having sex with a student is asking that the charges against her be dropped. Former Cold Springs High girls basketball coach Paige Adams is accused of several sex crimes involving a student. Records show Adams is arguing that the student was enrolled at another school and was over 18. Adams claims she was never in a position of authority over the alleged victim, and the charges against her should not apply. She pleaded not guilty and has waived her arraignment. Prosecutors have until July 22nd to respond. And where court records show that a former coach accused of having sex with a student
I think it's important that they show the kid. I mean, 18 years old, he's an adult technically, so they could show the victim technically. But she's arguing that he's from a different school. Okay, point made. Technically he could consent to. He was over the age. But I guess since he was in high school and in the same district, even though she held no power over him, it's seen as, a student taking advantage, a teacher taking advantage of a student rather. So yeah, and I think it's also important to show the victim in this case too, because I want to know whether or not the student was a male or a female. As a female basketball coach, a lot of times they are, they're gay. They like women. A lot of basketball players that are women are gay. So it makes me wonder if this was a female student or a male student. Interesting. So the comments here says, I had sexual relationships with all of my teachers. What's the issue here? He has to be trolling. This person says, why is this happening more frequently? Well, I don't think it's happening more frequently. I think it's always been happening. I think it's just being brought into the light now. It's now being exposed. This person says, what they be saying, fatigue. Okay. This person says, I could never, but when men do it, it's about them being legal. So what's the difference? Yeah. Solid point. Y'all let me know down in the comments what y'all think of this case and all of these cases for these school teachers gone wild, folks. And, every day we're seeing more and more of these pop up in the media, being exposed. And I'm sure this ain't the last one we're going to see and have to report on here. So y'all let me know what y'all think about those. All right. And for our last topic of today's episode, today's been a great episode so far. Shout out to all 4 people in the chat. We've been now going live for about an hour and 18 minutes. All right. So we'll finish off with one topic, keep today's episode nice and smooth. We have coming up next, NASA releases new photos of Mars and Jupiter. All right. So NASA releases the highest quality photos taken on Mars this week. All these photos were taken on Mars by NASA's Perseverance rover over the last week. The Perseverance rover at this point has taken over 987,000 photos on the red planet. All right. So here we have some pictures, of Mars. It almost looks like a desert, right? I mean, that's basically what it is, a big red desert with harsh climate and no atmosphere, right? Which it gets extremely cold at night, and then throughout the day, it can reach up to 75 degrees apparently, at most. So these pictures, they look pretty cool. It looks straight out of a sci-fi movie. And here you have it. Whether or not, okay, so this looks like some type of crystals or something, or some type of, mineral on the planet. And to think that we could ever, have it, successfully, Elon wants to make us get us to space, get us to Mars rather, and make us a multiplanetary species. Well, Mars is our only chance of doing that within our, within our solar system. He's pretty much the only person that's, has the money and the resources to be able to complete this, although it would be a task for the ages. And I don't think we're technologically advanced yet. Obviously, we have spaceships and rockets, but to be able to make it to Mars, there's only a certain window that we would have to be able to launch, and we would have, to be able to be lined up with Mars, and to be able to make it to the shortest flight possible. While also we would need to be carrying the right amount of fuel. And then once we get to Mars, we would have to create an environment which we can survive, that could withstand the lack of, atmosphere and the strict, the harsh climate. And then we would have to, live there for at least, 6 to 7 months before we're lined back up with Earth to be able to launch back if people were to actually want to get back to Earth, right? And then we would have to have the fuel to do so, as well as, not only that, but, dealing with unforeseen circumstances that could happen in space, loss of fuel. We would have to have the fuel. We would have to have, the food, the water to be able to survive. And so, yeah, I don't see it happening in my lifetime, us actually landing a human on Mars. Perhaps, obviously we have some time before Earth, is gone, before the sun explodes, which would be, I believe that the sun is at about half of its lifespan. So it's got millions and millions of more years to go. And I don't think that's how the Earth will go anyway, how civilization, human species, I believe, will end each other in some type of a war, some type of robot, Terminator type war before that the sun ever explodes on us. And we definitely have to go to another planet to survive. By then, I believe robots will have taken over. But y'all let me know, right? Would you go to Mars? I mean, look at it. It doesn't look too bad from the pictures, right? I mean, it looks like some type of desert somewhere. It doesn't look too bad. But this comment says, that's not Mars. This person says Nevada looks great. This person says it's just a bunch of damn rocks. This person says, you mean Arizona? Someone says, isn't this just Canada? So yeah, a lot of people not believing that these are real photos of Mars. And I think they could be. These could be real photos. Why not? We do have rovers apparently that are on Mars, right? We've had rovers land there, so those could be accurate. Not everything's a conspiracy theory, right? You have to be cautious, of course, when believing NASA, a government ran space organization. But other than that, it looks cool. Continuing on, we have NASA just released the clearest images of Jupiter ever. So NASA has released a new set of high resolution images of Jupiter as well, offering one of the clearest looks yet at the planet's atmosphere. The detail reveals tightly layered cloud bands, massive storm systems, and constant turbulence across a world where weather operates on a scale far beyond Earth. Beyond the visuals, the images carry scientific value, variations in color point to different chemical compositions, while the patterns map out powerful jet streams shaping the planet's climate. The Great Red Spot remains visible as well, a storm that has persisted for more than 3 centuries. All right, so here we have Jupiter, right? I think Jupiter is one of the coolest looking planets, right? Like how the color scheme, all the gases mixed together. Obviously, a rough planet to ever go on, right? You wouldn't be able to survive not even a second on Jupiter, but it's still beautiful and still amazing to think of that this is out there, in our solar system, floating around. With that black background, I think it's so sick how these planets look. Like, look at that. Like, you see I think this is the big red storm, or right here, the big red storm that they're talking about. That's the Great Red Spot, they call it, which is a storm that's persisted for more than 3 centuries. Incredible. Right? Imagine that on Earth, a hurricane that's lasted 3 centuries, right? We'd be cooked for sure. So there you have it, folks. That is our episode for today. All right. So shout out to everybody in the chat right now. We have 4 people across multiple platforms. I want to start streaming on Kick. Maybe, perhaps, because you can't talk about everything you want to talk about here on the YouTube and Twitter. All right. And I could probably, play more music on Kick and not have to worry about being copyrighted. I could react to more things and react to more videos as well. Well, y'all let me know. Would y'all watch on Kick? Should I start streaming on Kick? I'm thinking about it as well. So with that being said, that's our episode, folks. As always, the StormCast is everywhere you find podcasts. So subscribe on YouTube, drop a 5-star review on Spotify, and follow us on Twitter, Rumble, and Instagram. All links down in the description below. All right. So if you want to support the Patreon and support the podcast further as well, you can go and support the Patreon down in the description. For only about $5 a month, you get behind the scenes videos, podcasts, and content, as well as merch and other requests that you want, and a community of like-minded individuals. And that's just for $5 a month. Support me there, and that's a good way to show your support, a good way to inspire me and push me to keep going, keep making content for you all. And so, yeah, if you have any thoughts on today's topics, whether they were good or bad, happy or sad, how did they make you feel? What are your reactions to them? To what we talked about today? Go ahead and drop it down in the comments, or any other topics that you possibly want me to touch on, all right, in future episodes, which we'll be going back to every Friday. All right, so we're just doing Monday today because, well, I couldn't do last week, and so I figured I'd bring you guys a episode right as the week started, right? So appreciate everyone who tuned in for today's episode. I want to leave you off with 2 quotes today. All right, and the first one goes, "Discipline is the art of not betraying yourself." And that is from Marcus Aurelius, all right, the Stoic philosopher, a lot of you may know. And the second quote goes, "The life you seek is hidden inside the discipline you avoid." And that's from Epictetus, another philosopher. So both of these quotes have, the same theme of discipline. And they're saying the same truth from 2 different angles. Marcus Aurelius says, "Discipline is the art of not betraying yourself." This means that every time a man drops or abandons his standards, ignores his purpose, gives into weakness, procrastination, addiction, fear, comfort, laziness, excuses, he is betraying himself, not the world, himself. Discipline is loyalty to your future and your bloodline. All right. It's the ability to keep your word to yourself even when nobody is watching. Then Epictetus goes and takes it even deeper, right? He goes, the life you seek is hidden inside the discipline you avoid. The strength you want, the respect you want, the physique you want, the money, the peace, the confidence, the purpose, the freedom, it's all buried behind the exact pain, sacrifice, routine, and responsibility most people run from. The gym, they skip. The hard conversation, they avoid. The risk, they refuse to take. The habits, they won't control. The suffering, they keep escaping. That avoided discipline becomes prison. So together, these quotes form one brutal philosophy. When you avoid discipline, you betray yourself. And when you betray yourself long enough, you become separated from the life you were meant to live. Because discipline is not punishment. Discipline is self-respect in action. It is controlled aggression against weakness. It is the decision to suffer with purpose now instead of suffering later with regret. A powerful man is not built by motivation. He is built by repeated acts of self-honor when comfort is calling his name. Very deep stuff there. A lot to take from that. And I hope that touches you and, drives you to become more disciplined, more driven, more locked in on your goals, because you can do it. You can achieve anything you put your mind to. And shout out to Sexy Wheelchair 1-5 in the chat. She says, hey, how you doing? Shout out to you. And shout out to everybody who joined in today's episode. I will see you in the next one. I love you so much. Stay blessed. Stay beautiful. And just like that, we're out, folks. Goodbye, everybody.